has been,
Heather.
Father Caprio has been called away to a funeral, so he's driving and going to the funeral. And he has asked me to conduct this meeting today. So I will be your host. Of course, Mary is our real host, and she's controlling the, our Zoom session. Before we start, I'd like you to put everybody in the same space. So I'm going to recite a mantra, like do an invocation. Kame me savve jiva kamantu me, mitti me savve bhuvesu, peram majjanam navkanai. Basically, it's a giant mantra that we recite every day. And it says that I forgive everybody in the world, every living thing, and ask every living thing to forgive me. Everyone is my friend, and I have no enmity towards anyone. Basically, it says that if you believe that every living soul is a friend of yours, you will then treat him like a friend. You will have no expectation of a friend. You will not prejudge a friend, and you will always care for your friend. And that's what we should all be doing and it is all living beings, not just humans. It's humans, the animals, and even the Mother Earth. So that is where we should be. So I hope that today's meeting, we are all friends and we treat each other like a friend. Thank you. Before we start, I want to make sure that you have read the email that was sent by Father Caprio last night at 12:17 a.m. So he took pains to write at midnight, and I hope that everyone has read that email. It gives us some guidance, and it gives me the guidance as to how to manage this meeting today. So we have a number of topics that get suggested by Rajgopal and Maha. And is there anything else that we want to add, Will?
I have no new agenda items, no.
Okay. All right, so we will go to, the agenda item that, that was discussed by Raju. And, the thing is, thank you, Raju, for sending out the information. And everybody hopefully has read it. And is there any questions for Raju that you want to ask on the two topics that he has raised? I believe the first one is really between Hindu America Foundation and Hindus for Human Rights organizations. So that is not really a conference issue, but we can still ask him questions since he has pointed out something that is going on between the two organizations. And then again about the, caste discrimination. We will come to Israeli-Palestinian issue that Maha raised the third topic. Any question for Raju? Raju, you want to make a statement, maybe 5 minutes?
Yeah, let me address the second topic, the one of caste discrimination, which is extraordinarily important for us. More and more news reports are coming out about possible caste-based discrimination in the United States. Whether all of them are real or not, the very fact that people are reporting that they're being discriminated against is a very serious matter. And we have, as Hindus for Human Rights, one of our major objectives is to support groups that have been historically discriminated in India, and now we are very shocked to see that they are also reporting discrimination here. So we'll keep with that topic. I'm sure you all heard also about a possible alleged use of forced labor by a temple in New Jersey, again involving potentially Dalits and other lower caste people. Whatever the facts may eventually be, I just want to stress that we as Hindus for Human Rights, speaking with a Hindu voice, are staunchly opposed to any sort of caste discrimination, and we support efforts by some Dalit groups to make sure that caste is legally identified as a category under various laws, civil rights laws, as a possible group that is being discriminated against. So I'll leave it at that. There's plenty of resources. Santa Clara County held a public hearing, a very long one, 7.5 hours. And we appreciate, truly appreciate the county taking effort here to get input from people, even as the specific case, the Cisco case, is being still legally adjudicated. So I'll leave it at that. We'll continue to work on that. And anybody who has interest in following caste discrimination issues, please, feel free to, send an email to me. The first topic, I think I've pretty much laid out what I had to say about the legal issue between Indo-American Foundation and ourselves. I don't think I intended that to be a topic of discussion here other than information. And I noticed that HAF has put their thoughts out as well. And I will leave it to all of you to judge where that goes. Whatever we do, we have done in good conscience, raising the awareness of tremendous anti-constitutional efforts that are going on in India, and we will continue to do that. Thank you. Thank you, Girish, for giving me an opportunity.
You're welcome. I mean, no one in this group here would condone any kind of discrimination, including the discrimination that has gone on in India for centuries, or if not millennia. And India has taken actions on it, and whatever actions need to be taken according to our own constitution here and our own way of working. The solution has to be something that fits into our structure. So everyone will have ideas, and it gets debated. And luckily, we have a strong justice system, and the court cases will get educated, and there will be some resolutions, and that out of which will come the case history, which can be used by every group. So I wait till the Cisco case gets resolved, and whatever happens to the case in New Jersey, when that gets resolved. Because one thing we do not want to do, and that is what is our philosophy: you are presumed to be innocent until proven guilty, not the other way around. You are guilty until proven innocent. The media will always behave like you are guilty until you are proven innocent. That's the media's job, to immediately publicize and put the blame on someone. So I'm going to leave it at that. If anybody else wants to say something on these two topics, or at least this one topic, please feel free to speak up.
Hey,
unmute your mic and say, okay, Kaushik.
Hey, hi, Girish. Hey, thanks for giving a chance. So I'm from the Hindu American Foundation. I'm the national committee member, as well as the Northern California chapter coordinator. So wanted to add to what Raju had mentioned. We definitely agree with Raju about the second point, that we should not have any caste discrimination, and we strongly condemn if there's any caste discrimination. And we participated in the Santa Clara hearings too. And however, what our stance is, the existing laws, the federal and the state laws, already strongly prevent, or they're available for anybody who is facing caste discrimination, and laws can be used, as in the case of the temple, or in various cases where there has been a real caste discrimination. The federal and the state laws, especially the ones preventing discrimination based on ancestry, country of origin, can be used to persecute or investigate these cases. So what we feel is adding these additional caste as a category will only complicate things and single out Indian Americans and Hindu Americans and lead to more discrimination or stigmatizing them and singling out. And also one more thing I wanted to point out is this is not operationally possible in United States. And how do we roll this out where adding caste as a category will lead to more complications on how oneself identifies a caste. Many Hindus here grown up don't even know what their caste is, and as well as many Indian Americans. So what we feel is the existing laws protect against caste discrimination, and they should be definitely be used in case there's any caste discrimination. And bringing in this new category will only single out and create more hatred against Hindus and Indian Americans.
Thank you, Kaushik.
Girish,
Yes.
Girish, can I quickly make a couple of points because Kaushik has enumerated the position. The one thing, and I hope this adds to the discussion and people that are thinking about it, Cisco's claim as to why they did not act on a complaint of caste discrimination was precisely because they said it's not covered. Caste discrimination is not covered under the laws, so as a company, we don't have to do anything. So that kind of flies in the face of the idea that current laws cover it, which is why people are asking explicitly for a legal precedence to be created. Whether it's under, companies will continue to insist that they don't have to do anything. That's number one, Kaushik. Just please consider that. And the the whole idea that somehow adding caste discrimination as a category would somehow make every Hindu in America suspect is in my humble view, it's not a valid argument. It would be like saying if having strictures against racism would somehow make every white person in the US suspect. And that is not a valid argument, and I reject that. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I want to let everybody else talk about it, and I'll make a point afterwards. A question for you, actually. Anybody else have a comment?
Hey, Girishi, can I respond or shall I wait for?
No, Will, go ahead.
I just want to point out that even though I've read a little bit about this, I don't know enough about caste to be able to know what is religious and what is cultural and what is contributing to the overall aspect of this. And I think if I'm feeling this way, there are probably other people in my interfaith councils that feel this way. And maybe we need to have some education around caste and just to understand this aspect of culture and religion and where's the overlap and just to understand things a little bit better. And I think we all agree that discrimination in any form is not why we're here. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree. We will take it up at the council, ICP, and I'll request Father Caprio to see if he wants to organize something. I mean, ICP does not, this conference does not organize. Each individual council would have to decide when they want to organize it. Or we as a council of interfaith councils can decide to do something. And maybe this is one of the topics we can have in our fall event if you want to. Anyway, anybody else, Ihsan?
Yes, yes. I just wanted to reiterate that, of course, Hindu American Foundation has always, is now, and will always be against any and all discrimination. And we all in this group, I think, want to, assert our identity with the soul, with our divine soul, commune with God, manifest that spirit in nonviolence, and truth, and fellowship. And as Hindus, of course, we believe the soul takes on bodies of every race and every ancestry. So there's no basis for any intrinsic discrimination. So we certainly agree with Raju on that point. Thank you.
And anyone else before I conclude this particular part of the topic? I would like to just ask one question. So we get this in the books, and let's say if we get it into the books of all at the federal level, at the federal government level, what then? How does that change? This is a question I don't want you to answer. I want you to think about it. What then? My second generation kids here, my third generation kids, because my grandsons are just graduating, they're starting their companies. They have no concept of caste. Would they have to then now learn about caste? They have to know, they have to be cognizant of it rather than being agnostic to it, which they are right now, they're agnostic to caste. They would then be required to understand the caste, know the differences of caste, and be careful about if somebody applies, whether he's a Dalit and lower caste, and not
let's start small.
be extra
Start
careful
small and
about.
say at least 3 days.
We got somebody, please
We can.
mute yourself. Please, everybody mute yourself. So it's a question of whether we want to perpetuate the casteism by making everyone aware of it, or we want to make everyone agnostic about it, because the second and third generation don't even see the color. They don't even see. So we have to look at it forward. The first generation coming into US always have certain feelings from India because they bring it with them. But as those who grow here differently, I just want to leave it at that. It's only for you to think about whether that is. So let's take a second topic, which is Israel and Palestinian issue. Father Caprio sent a wonderful
Was
video.
Mahat going to be here for this, or should we wait? Is she on her way?
I don't know if she's coming.
attending.
Ishan is there for, as a representative of ING.
Sure.
So, but this is a very good video that is, Zachariah's video, and it shows the history in terms of what the situation is. Israel being the superpower in the Middle East doesn't need to compromise, doesn't need to have peace agreement, but it does. But what is it? And I think what he says here is a moral issue for Israel, for Jewish people. And he has quoted one of the scriptures, Isaiah 49:6, referencing Israel called to become light to the nations. So I don't know if everyone has seen the video, but I would advise everyone to. I find it very, very educational. And anyway, so with that, I open up. And Isaac, you want to say something more on it, since Maha brought up the topic?
Yeah, I can really briefly. I'm honestly sure Reverend Will has maybe more to say, but I don't want to put him on the spot. But in general, I think one thing that's just really important to recognize, and it's a comment on both issues. I think the issue of things maybe going on in India, as well as Israel and Palestine, as well as other things, is just, I really think that the Interfaith Council should take these issues up in the way that I've seen the Reverend Will's Council, I feel like, has done a great job of doing a lot of that so far. But I think us trying to ignore these issues and leaving them to be international issues only has the potential to further the divide in the United States. I think we're at a point now where we're seeing the ways in which international issues are affecting relations in the US. And unfortunately, the issue of Palestine and how people feel about Palestine has become a very big issue in terms of how people are willing to work together. And I think in general, as we are interfaith people looking to pursue peace, it's important for us all to be able to denounce extremism as we see that extremism happening, whether that's Palestinian, whether that's Israeli, whether that's recognition of an occupation. I think it's going to be increasingly harder for us to sit in interfaith spaces and interfaith panels and things like that when other panelists are people that fundamentally may not align with our notion of what peace looks like or what peace is in the world. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that, not to get into the specifics of anything relating to the current issues, but I do think talking about it is very important.
I think just adding to what you just said, Ishan, Ma had asked if we have any input from the communities here, both the Palestinian community and or Jewish community regarding this issue and how it is affecting them. I think that was a wonderful thought on her part. If we are able to hear from those who are affected by it, whether they are for this way or that way, how is that affecting their life here? Have you got anything that you can bring to, or anybody else can bring, how the issue is impacting the community here?
Yeah, Girish, this is a topic that has also been close to my heart for the last 25 years. I've been to the Middle East, I've traveled in the refugee camps in Gaza, spoken to peace groups, both Jewish and Palestinian peace groups. To me, the biggest hurdle to dialogue in the United States is pre-censorship. Pre-censorship, I remember times when Palestinians were scheduled to speak at the UC Berkeley campus, and a whole bunch of Zionists will show up to block that person from speaking. So as a starting point, we have to assert the right of Palestinians in every venue to speak so that an average American can make up his or her own mind. But if we are constantly bombarded, I know it's changing now, but I know for years, anything about Palestinians were not told. So what we can do is to bring those stories, both the Jewish stories and the Palestinian stories, in a human way, for people to listen to where were their families, where are they right now, do they have any relatives in the still in the refugee camp? These are kind of human interest stories that try to bring some equity to the dialogue, and that is where we can help, I think, as an interfaith group, not by proposing actual solutions for which over which we have no control. That would be my 2 cents worth, is promote dialogue and open space for both Palestinians and Jews, whether Israeli Jews or American Jews, to speak about how this issue is affecting them.
Well, I agree. That's exactly what Maha has said, and I'm just looking for any not only the stories of people in Israel or Palestinian, but the stories of people who are here and how they are impacted by it.
Gotcha.
Because our interest is in local impact. And so do we have any stories, or maybe that will be for some time in the future that people can bring? We can ask our Jewish friends to bring, how is it impacting their community? Because I'm sure with this Jewish community, they have different groups. One that is strongly for Israel, one that is not, condone the violence that is taking place. So they themselves have differences as far as I know, because I've talked to some of them. And so that itself is causing conflict within the community here. And I think we need to hear about the conflict that is causing here in the community, because that can spill over to us.
So I think one of the reasons why we're seeing as many people appeal to the American people is because our country is the new Rome. And in some ways, that's helpful for us as citizens, but in other ways, it's a real struggle for the rest of the world because it means that the American people and American opinion matter on these other conflicts around the world because our government is expected to step in or not, or our government is expected to be an honest broker for peace or not. So in some ways, the appeals for our co-religionists, be they Palestinian Christians or Muslims or Israeli Jews or Muslims in Burma, Myanmar, or Muslims in Western China. In the plight of many of these people, sometimes we feel as if the only way that their plight can be addressed is by asking our president or our government to take a position on these. And it feels in some ways that the conflict that we've discussed before this going on in India and the stressors of Hindu nationalism are taking on some of the same flavors of other conflicts that we try to adjudicate in public opinion in this country because of the role of America as a hegemon. What if we took away that relationship? What if we exposed that relationship as unhelpful to our own people? Because if those conflicts over there become conflicts here, then we're going to start replicating those land disputes and other forms of intercultural, interreligious conflict. So I don't know how we take American politics out of the mix, but it feels like we need to expose that as the motivating factor within our culture. It's so sad to watch people turn on themselves on the streets of Haifa or Tel Aviv or Lod or any of these other places. And in some ways, that's where this conflict, this round of conflict, even though it's asymmetrical, continues to be so hard to watch because it feels like it might be going deeper into Israeli society. And for those of us who care for any of the peoples in that region, I think we need to be able to not only recognize how central those conflicts are to many of our own faith traditions, but I think we need to be able to step back as Americans and not involve ourselves in a peace process that is someone else's.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Will, if I may, Girish, I don't want to dominate it, but I do want to make one point about Will's comments. That is, in some of these cases, Will, my view is nobody is taking a neutral American government to suddenly take on a position for A or B. In many cases, they're already deeply entrenched with one party, A, and party B is appealing for some equity in that consideration. So it's not as though people are trying to draw America into the conflict. They feel that America has already drawn itself into the conflict in support of one government for whatever reason, geostrategic reason or whatever. I think the people that are suffering in many cases are feeling that America is not being equal. They'll be happy if America washes its hands completely. Some of them will be happy, knowing that the support for A will also go down. You see what I mean? So I don't want to name any names, but I think it's more than just drawing the American government to interfere in our conflicts in other countries, but rather asking America to take a holistic view that the values that they hold dear in their own country, they hold dear for other peoples in other countries.
Thank you. I would say that, we're not going to solve the problem of our politics, here. All we can
Sorry,
do is
Ellen,
think
did you have
about-
your hand up earlier?
that, our politics is complicated, and, people have taken sides. So, and our industrial military complex is also playing at it, because they want to sell all the arms all over the world. We sell it to both sides and say, go fight it. And, we make the money in between. So it's a moral issue for us as a public, as a spiritual people, that our government does based on, its feeling of what is powerful interest of a country's interest, which not necessarily agrees with people's interest. So we'll have to leave at that. I think I would still suggest everybody to see that video that Father Caprio has sent, and it'll give you a good understanding of the situation, the balance of power in the Middle East, and the moral issue for Jewish people to follow Isaiah's 49.6, be the light to the nations. Anyway.
So Garish, before we move on from this, I I do want to share just a little bit of how our approach was different this time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you all have seen the statement that we put out, but it was more of an educational statement. So each of our interfaith councils is different. Some of us were built or created out of an interfaith crisis, or the Loma Prieta earthquake for San Francisco, or earlier or later than other interfaith councils. Mine happens to have been started as a council of churches that was only for mainline Protestants in 1960. And they created a council of churches in order to do community chaplaincy. And at one point, they had 5.5 full-time equivalents of chaplains, including chaplains in jails, hospitals, and everywhere. And as chaplaincy has become more professionalized in the hospitals and in certain care facilities, we haven't continued to have that system of oversight. We have one chaplain left, and that's our interfaith juvenile chaplain at Juvenile Hall. But we became interfaith in 1997 because our Social Justice Alliance started to be able to include Roman Catholics and Jews and Muslims. But the council was hesitant and didn't want to give up its Christian privilege, let's admit it. And so when they finally did become interfaith, it was a lot of the more conservative churches that were part of the Council of Churches faded out of our work, and more moderate to progressive Christian churches, almost all of the Catholic parishes are in the council. But then we were starting to able to welcome the Jewish congregations and movements, and Muslim communities, and Baha'is, and even the Catholics and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were included in this Council of Churches. So when it became interfaith, it was a big deal. And because it was a part of a social justice alliance, we have a history of speaking out on different issues. And that's why we've done some issues and worked even behind the scenes to try to get the Yazidi genocide named genocide at the UN, and have worked on certain human rights issues. So that's a part of our history. It's not a part of every interfaith council. Some councils have a history and a culture of creating these statements, and some don't, and we understand that that's okay. But when it comes to these conflicts, every time there's a conflict in Israel and Palestine, it felt like there was going to be a conflict on our interfaith council. So we've sharpened our policy. Just about every 5 years, we redo our rapid response policy, and we've added an encouragement to do a lot more educational and trying to create a separation between those outside conflicts going on in the world so that we don't replicate them inside of our own interfaith council. And so that's why you saw us take a more educational stance this time. And in some ways, we were able to also help express the diversity of the whole, the greater religious communities as they were putting out statements asking for the ceasefires or asking for this or that with the conflict as it was ratcheting up. I'm still waiting for our own government to address the religious freedom issues, especially for Eastern Orthodox Easter, which was disrupted, and some of them weren't allowed inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. the barring or the use of violence against people in Al-Aqsa Mosque should be something that I think we do need to talk about as interfaith councils. Because religious freedom anywhere, when that gets suppressed, becomes a huge stepping stone towards other sides, forms of fascism. And I think we need to be able, if we could take a unified conversation, I think it should be around religious freedom. And then we know that how the home confiscations led to this latest round of violence as well. But I don't want us to lose sight of those precursors to the other violence, which have kind of taken over the conversation, because I think we do have a role as interfaith councils to talk about religious freedom in Jerusalem and making sure that that's something that we discuss. So before we move on, let's at least talk about that.
And any comment to add to Will's? I mean, Will, each of our councils do differently, but we do coordinate at times, and we have done joint statements in support of each other. So we do come together, on certain topics that is of mutual interest. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything more to it.
This is Jerry. I'm on the phone on the highway. I just want to support the comments that Will just made about religious freedom and so on. That is something we should really be thinking about. I think he makes a very good point. I'm not sure about all the things we should do, but that's where our discussion, I think, is worth going. I think that's the only comment that I will make. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Father Caprio. I agree. Religious freedom, actually, when you look at it, religious freedom is a US concept, it's an American concept. It is not the case in most countries. The religious organizations do not have freedom. The government is always in the middle of it in terms of promoting or not promoting religious traditions in the country. We seem to, because our founding fathers put the religious freedom in the Constitution, we have a separation of church and government, state, that we have that religious freedom, but other countries don't. So I understand in England that the government will give funding to build temples or build churches. And of course they influence it with that purse. So they obviously have some, not necessarily have the same kind of freedom as we have. And I agree, but we can export our freedom, religious freedom concept to the rest of the world. And if our government can help us export those concepts, that would be wonderful for the rest of the world, where their spiritual practice is not being interfered by the state. That's the comment I want to add.
Yeah, I would support.
Go ahead.
I would support Reverend Will's theme and Father Jerry's comment that issuing some sort of statement on religious freedom would be within the scope of our group, whereas politics may be, better handled by other groups. But certainly religious freedom is something we could all get together on.
Well, I want to just read what Father Caprio wrote this morning, early this morning, so that we are all in sync. The purpose of this conference. He writes, we obviously cannot debate these issues during the monthly conference, except to recognize the realities and offer further insights to assist in our understanding of them. It would be well for the individual councils to take up as they wish. So this conference does not issue any positions, does not, come up with a statement. Each individual council has to do it. This purpose of this conference is to disseminate information and make people aware of it. But each of the council themselves would have to, based on their structure and their goals and objectives and guidelines, they would have to take up the positions and make issue statement. We are not an organized, we don't have a conference, is not organized. It's not an organization that can issue statements. So I just want to just remind everybody that when you say we should, it means we are recommending the councils to take up the issue and issue a statement.
Good clarification. Thank you, Girishji.
But do we want to talk about holy places and access?
Yeah, I would. Why don't you? It will be good to where are the? What are the holy places that people are not? What are the religious? I think you gave few names. I would like to learn about it. I'm sure others would learn about it. Would be educational. Go ahead, Will.
Well, I was hoping Ishak might further help us understand what being the third holiest site in Islam, what the Haram al-Sharif means to Muslims.
Yeah, I think, so Reverend Will mentioned a few different sites, one relating to the Eastern Orthodox tradition, which you would hopefully be able to elaborate on. I can speak briefly to the Muslim site. So in the Muslim religion, there are really three major mosques in the world. The first is in Mecca, which you may have heard of. The second is in Medina, which is the Prophet, peace be upon him, mosque. And the third is Jerusalem in Aqsa, which is Al-Aqsa Mosque. And it has significance to Muslims as being recognized universally as the third most important mosque in the country, in the world. So I think when there was issues that were surrounding Sheikh Jarrah and the mosque, specifically at the end of Eid, mind you. Eid is one of the most important holidays for Muslims right at the end of Ramadan. All of that combined to create an issue of religious freedom in this area, as well as of, on the political side, as well as of evictions and land and potential land grab opportunities. So this was something that ignited a lot of Muslims around the world, even more than what they might have been ignited otherwise, because it wasn't, for a lot of Muslims around the world, it wasn't even just an issue of, the political human rights issue, but it was an issue relating to this mosque in particular, which is something that Muslims around the world hold very, very close to their hearts. And so that, I think, is an example of the ways in which, we saw provocations by the Israeli government at the time that really wrestled with a lot of Muslims in Palestine, of course, relating to the human rights elements, but also just the average Muslim around the world, which then ultimately, again, starts to reframe a lot of those conversations with how do we handle interfaith relations in the United States when we're seeing this blatant provocation by the Israeli government, and then furthermore the level of escalation that we saw afterwards, and we hopefully is dwindling, but the escalation afterwards. But that's, I think, a big thing relating to the mosque in particular. It holds its significance from being a site where the Prophet Muhammad traveled from Mecca to, there's a story in the Quran of the Prophet Muhammad traveling from Mecca to Al-Aqsa Mosque in one day, and then the next night he goes from Al-Aqsa Mosque into the heavens and journeys there and journeys back. And so it's a revered story that's taught to children, and Al-Aqsa is the central element of that story.
And this is Khalid, if I may add to what Ishaq said.
Thanks, Khalid.
Muslims used to pray towards the Al-Aqsa Mosque, so that was their sort of a guiding direction of prayer prior to later revelations coming in and changing it to Makkah. And just wanted to emphasize that in particular with this particular conflict, what has happened was that the provocation of people were praying in the mosque on the most holiest night of the year for Muslims, on the 27th of Ramadan. Right, this is where the Quran was supposed to have been revealed, and it got disrupted. And the context behind that is that It relates to evictions in a neighborhood that would essentially block the way into Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this, and that too was doing it on the most holiest of the nights seemed like like a deliberate provocation to vast majority of Muslims around the world. So just wanted to highlight that.
Thanks for explaining that. I didn't know that.
I thank you, Khalid and Isaac. I understand that Jerusalem is a holy place for 3 religions. We hear that all the time. Or 5?
More than 3. The Druze, it's holy to Sikhs too.
Okay, so is that, I mean, is the access to Jerusalem restricted by government of Israel, or do they keep it fairly open?
So the access from, others who have been there can probably comment more on that. But generally, the way the West Bank and Jerusalem is positioned is that it is like a Swiss cheese, where the holes are where Palestinians have some autonomy, but everything else is, if you want to go from one hole in a Swiss cheese to another hole, you have to pass through a series of checkpoints. And so these checkpoints is essentially how mobility is controlled, both not only between the various settlements of various places of his neighborhoods of Palestinians, but also access into the mosque.
Thank you. I think we are coming closer to our end time, so why don't we just switch gears? This is enough to think about here, and each of the council need to decide.
Well, let me just try to explain the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 2 or 3 minutes, because
Sure.
It's also a contentious site for Christians. Inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there's 13 different Eastern Orthodox patriarchates. They each have a chapel. Most of them have a chapel inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There are some contested chapels where monks from different orders claim control over these different chapels from the roof, and they'll camp out on the roof to claim oversight of this or that chapel. And there's so much conflict over the different parts of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is holy to most Christians, that the keys for the Church of the Holy Sepulchre are entrusted to a Muslim family because it's so contentious for Christians. But it is the place that Western Christians and Eastern Christians both go during their holiest week, Palm Sunday and Easter. And it's only every 5 or 6 years that those dates can collide with the difference between a Gregorian and a Julian calendar that their different groups are using. But I just wanted to point out that access to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is inside the old city, has also been restricted from time to time by the Israeli military.
The result of the conflicts, the world conflicts, So again, I think we obviously, each of us has to see what we can do and how we go about it. Before I should have done this earlier, I would like to at least go around and everybody just give introduction in terms of their name, their position, and who are they associated with, because I think there are some new people that I have not seen them before. So why don't we start? I'm just going to go by the list I see on so I'm Girish Shah. I'm board chair of Silicon Valley Interreligious Council and a board chair of Jain Center of Northern California, or Jain Temple.
Will McGarvey, Executive Director of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, and Reverend Channing Miller is with our elected council. You want to introduce yourself, Channing? I have a Christian and a pagan practice, by the way. Sorry, go ahead, Channing.
Right. Yeah, so I'm so lucky to be invited by Will to participate in this group. I just want to say I really, really like the topics and the dialogue here. It seems extremely high level, And I really think that there's so much need for education, even in our interfaith councils, to have people truly understand the nature of the problems from different perspectives. And the dialogue is so critical, you know, that we are really consulting as we dialogue. You know, we really are able to speak our truth without really being contested. And so I really believe that this is the path for interfaith, is this dialogue and dealing with the complexity of the world. So thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
Okay, Renee?
Good morning. My name is Renee Castle. I am representing Eden Area Interfaith Council. I'm the treasurer of that organization. I'm also a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church. I too believe that the moral positions that an interfaith council and different faiths can take is critical in the world today as we move forward, and that we need to take back all of our individual faiths from governments and other organizations that would misrepresent and use and play us as the villains against each other. So we stand together and make community and say that is not who we are.
Amen. Hey, Ishaq?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ishaq. I work for ING Islamic Networks Group as the Bay Area Director. And I appreciate all of this conversation. I think it's something that I think I brought up briefly in one of our previous meetings, and appreciate that. And Girish, I do appreciate your facilitation of the conversation as well.
Thank you. Raju?
Yeah, I'm Raju Rajagopal. I'm a co-founder of a fairly new organization called Hindus for Human Rights. Our objective is to speak up for pluralism and religious freedom, especially in South Asia and North America. And I wanted to just also thank Girish for his moderation today, which I think was probably the best discussion we've had. I'm new to this group, but in the few meetings that I've had, this was a very good discussion. Thank you.
No accolades are needed. Thank you. Ishan?
Yes, hi, I'm Isan Katir, the California Advocacy Director for the Hindu American Foundation. The Hindu American Foundation is a 17-year-old advocacy group based in Washington, D.C. that speaks up on issues that affect the 3+ million Hindus in North America. And we stand for pluralism and openness and wanting human rights for all.
Thank you. Khalid?
Hi, good morning. I am Khalid Azam. I'm the co-founder of Indian American Muslim Council, which is the largest advocacy organization of Indian American Muslims in the United States. It was founded in 2002, so we are closing in on, will be 20 years next year. And we take up issues related to religious freedom and human rights, sort of both in the United States as well as in South Asia and India in particular.
Thank you. Kaushik? Are you still there, Kaushik? Maybe he is not listening. Mary, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mary Zambukos, and I'm the Administrative Assistant for the Interfaith Center at the Presidio, and I'm a practicing Eastern Orthodox Christian.
Thank you. And she is the one why we are together on this conference call. She is managing our Zoom conference. And so I think I covered everyone on the—
Mary is an interfaith goddess in her own right.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Namaste, goddess. Anyway, we got a couple more minutes, and I think one of the topics that we need to look at is, we didn't discuss it this time, it probably should be, is to, as we come out of the COVID, which we are opening up and coming out of it, after a year of seclusion, year of being homebound, now we'll have the freedom. And a lot has gone on through this year. So we need to kind of see how we will cope with it, how the councils will be called upon and to, as we open up, because people will have different needs. We wouldn't be the same as before. So many of our programs are now nationwide. Most of our programs, the giant programs, are designed and timing wise to accommodate throughout the country and sometimes even India. So I would have a program 8 o'clock in the morning, our time, so that it's 8:30 in the evening, India time. And now all of a sudden, when we get to doing in person, and those people will be left out. So how do we deal with that? And go back to our own local environment. But anyway, we all need to think how we can help our communities, how we can, what we are called upon to do as faith community to help with the recovery efforts from the COVID. Recovery means reconstruction or reestablishment of our lives. So think about it. We'll discuss that up next time. Hopefully we can spend time on it, because that is the topic of the time, and we need to see what we can do together as a conference. Any last words by anybody?
Yeah, Girish, I have a feeling that even past COVID, the idea of remote conversations is here to stay. I think in whatever forums we have where we used to personally attend, we should make sure that in addition to the personal meetings that are taking place, they also connect up with remote people to start a new era of broadening the conversation. I can't travel to DC, for example, for every meeting that's going on, but if I have an opportunity to be part of various congressional briefings via Zoom, it'll add, and I'm talking about everybody here. So I think that will be the trend I'm seeing, but we all have to work at it to make sure that our voices will remain, even if it is remote.
Well, I think the issue is going to be technological, in the sense that we have a service in the church. How do you make it virtual, hybrid? Because you don't have the equipment to show the people who are, I'm just saying that we're not going to debate it today. I'm just saying that those are the challenges, and people, remote people should not feel that they are just listeners. They have to feel participants. And how do you make them feel participant, which they are able to make right now because everybody's able to speak up. So anyway, there are a lot of challenges and we will have to address those. I agree with you that going forward, the hybridness is not going to go away. Anybody else?
Well, just thank you, Girish, for chairing the meeting today.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I hope I did proper job, which you have gave me accolades, so thank you for it.
Thank you.
And I think, Mary, we can close the meeting in 2 minutes early.
Okay.
Okay.
It was wonderful to see everyone. Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Mary.
Namaste.
You can just